Hello everybody, I know we're just off the heels of a big thing with Electronic Arts where they had the most downvoted comment of all time, and it seems that the general player base, or at least the vocal minority, aren't complete idiots after all. So in that spirit, let's talk about Skyrim Together today. ZeniMax Media isn't quite EA yet, but oh boy are they on their way. So before I can talk about the stuff surrounding Skyrim Together, first I have to explain what Skyrim Together is, because some people haven't heard. So for those of you who are wondering what Skyrim Together is, it is a multiplayer framework by which you can play Skyrim together with your friends. As if the name wasn't self-explanatory enough, I know, right? Well, despite being in the standard creation engine, and, you know, Bethesda engines have never been extremely stable. That's why the Elder Scrolls 3 multiplayer mod that's been running for a long time, TS3MP, is built directly into a new engine called OpenMW, the Open Morrowind engine. But for whatever reason, it looks like Skyrim Together is a fairly stable project at this point. And unlike previous projects like Skyrim Online or Tamriel Online, this looks not nearly as janky. As those of us who've actually hopped into TS3MP know, for classic fans, this gives Elder Scrolls Online a run for its money. It allows you to have an actual Elder Scrolls cooperative experience instead of an Elder Scrolls skinned MMORPG. And for those of us who've been playing MMORPG since their inception, genre fatigue has certainly kicked in, and we can probably do without MMOs of that particular type, the World of Warcraft theme park type that ESO is chasing. So this isn't a question for most people clicking on this video, but I'm going to go over it anyway. What happened? So in order to move forward with the Skyrim Together project, they wanted to use the Steam API. That is, the Steam protocols for matchmaking and lobbies and chat. You know, have it all run through the Steam service, which several really good games have done. I'll get into those a little later on. However, there is one catch. Any developer looking to make their mod quote-unquote official on Steam needs the permission of the developer. In this case, Bethesda Softworks, the publisher, gets to speak for the developers in this case, and they said no. And they gave no reason for it. Not that they need to, they just said no. Now, a lot of people have asked me what have I thought about Skyrim Together in the past, and my answer has always been, ask me again when I have access to a functional copy of it. The same thing with pretty much any mod is, you gotta give us access to the goings-on, or I can't promote it other than to say, well, this is a project that exists, I guess. Maybe it'll come out some year. Hey, you want to hear a joke? Apollo Down. Yeah, I know, it's not very funny. This is the guy who went ahead and took down all his mods because of Donald Trump winning the election. And he flipped out and, you know, standard tribal human, he associated everyone with Nazis and just garbage human being behavior. But either way, he went ahead and terminated his long-running mod Awake, which actually had a trailer out for it. It was going to be bringing Manny Marco, the King of Worms, into Skyrim, and now it's gone. So I find that it's best not to get too excited for projects that aren't out yet, or at least not in public hands, because once it's out on the internet, it can't be taken back, and that's really neat. I know that Nintendo learned that with AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake. They took it down, but it still exists. People still talk about it. So as we know, Skyrim is a Steam game through and through. There is no non-Steam version that wasn't hacked to be that way. The non-Steam versions that some people pick up in some stores in Eastern Europe or South Africa and a few other markets are actually pirated, cracked, and then put on official-looking media and official-looking packages. They are outright theft. Anyway, Skyrim Together, in order to streamline the development process, they wanted to use the Steamworks API to handle matchmaking, lobbies, chat, and more. The problem is, in order to release a mod using that API, they need to be confirmed as an official mod. Now, some people will flip out when I use the term official mod, because how can it be official if it's a mod? And that was some of the arguments people made trying to explain why the Creation Club wasn't paid mods, even though it was very clearly the spirit of paid mods, simply retooled into something else. And all the people who defend it as such just don't realize that this is known as technical or legal fiction that's created using details to obfuscate the reality that...
It is a legend no one will forget. Everyone thought King Koopa had left the Mushroom Kingdom, and then his doom ship attacked. King Koopa was back with the greatest danger ever known, his Koopa kids.
Paid mods are back. Either way, so the question is, how can it be official? If it's a mod, turns out it's very easy. The company takes no responsibility for the mod, if it works, if it has updates, so on and so forth, but it acknowledges that this is the kind of mod that users would like. And so it is placed on Steam and can be downloaded for free off of Steam with a little banner on the Steam page saying this mod requires a full purchased copy of and then the game in order to run. You want to play Half-Life's main campaign with your friends? We got Sven Co-Op for that. Go check out the Steam page. You want to play Half-Life 2's main campaign with your friends? We've got the Synergy mod for that. Check out its Steam page. But hey, that's just a crazy Valve thing, right? Because Valve is a totally different type of company. I mean, no other company would do that, right? Well, Just Cause 2 has their multiplayer mod on Steam right now. Go check out its Steam page. All they needed was permission from Avalanche Studios, and it was up on Steam for free. Just requires Just Cause 2 to play. And that isn't the only case outside of Valve. There's cases all over Steam of these official mods that have been put up for various games. So let's run off the premise that, well, those unwashed peasant developers let other people muddle around and create official mods on their games. At least Bethesda is pure and would never let a third party sully the name of their work. Well, except for the Skyrim script extender that you can search for on Steam right now for the old version of Skyrim, the classic version of Skyrim. It's on Steamworks right now, an official mod for Skyrim. There's your exception. There's your Bethesda. Now, some people will go, oh, well, they've proven themselves, blah, 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 blah. But the main reason they added this was because there were many, many mods that required the Skyrim script extender. And this was a period of time where Bethesda wanted to sell mods for the old version of Skyrim. The lack of the Skyrim script extender was a barrier to free profit. Free profit sounds really weird, right? It means that they need to put in no effort and they receive money for having put in no effort. And any barriers in the way of something like that, they gotta go. So they gave Steam permission for SKSE, and there it is today. Remember though, there's a reason why people who had the Legendary Edition of Skyrim were given the Skyrim Special Edition for free. It wasn't altruism. It wasn't them taking care of their fans. It was they want your eyes off of the Classic Edition, or the, as people call it, Old Rim. They want your eyes off of that, and they want your eyes on the special edition where there's microtransactions. They know most people wouldn't have rebought Skyrim because the old version had more mods for it. So what they did, at least for the PC users, because this is where it was relevant, where modding was relevant, they gave it for free so that they would get people to migrate to the new version. The new version is much more stable. There's definitely reasons to migrate. Bethesda wants your eyes off of the Skyrim Classic Edition, or as people call it, Old Rim. That's why when you go to Steam, you type in Skyrim, only the special edition pops up. You need to have the actual URL for the old version to be able to find the Steam page and buy it now. The only reason I suspect they haven't nuked the game entirely is because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a core Steam game, which means achievements, workshop support, and all the things required for older copies to function require it to be on Steam. There's no other reason. They just don't want to break all their older versions of the game, because that would piss off a lot of people, especially after some of the promises they made regarding the older version. I don't believe any sort of legacy support that the classic version is getting is due to altruism. I just believe it's due to any desire to avoid problems that would arise from it. Better just leave it in maintenance mode, hide it so less people buy it, and direct all traffic to that special edition which contains recurring income. We'll get back to that. As a modern company that acts as a front for ZeniMax Media, the publisher, Bethesda Softworks, must first and foremost look out for its profits. The Skyrim Classic Edition was a one-shot payment people made. Players who buy Skyrim Classic Edition are unlikely to buy the Skyrim Special Edition for a greater cost. And the small price difference isn't why people are being directed there. As I said earlier, the Skyrim Special Edition has one thing the Classic doesn't: recurring income. And I have a history in sales work. It's a numbers game. Every 1,000 people you expose to the Creation Club, X number will buy something. Doesn't matter if it's 1, 10, or 100. You know that the odds say as long as you solicit X amount of people with your offer, that someone somewhere will be your customer, provided you do everything right. Now, we'll touch on that point in a future video with that Call of Duty World War II shenanigans, but the point here is they need to get as many people exposed to the Creation Club as possible in order to generate that recurring income. That's only one piece of the puzzle, though. Another is the fact that Bethesda Softworks acts as a publisher for ZeniMax Online Studios, the people who are responsible for Elder Scrolls Online. Originally, ESO built itself on a subscription service like World of Warcraft. In fact, if you really want to know, in the alpha versions of ESO, they had tab targeting. I mean, like actual auto attacks. It wasn't Elder Scrolls-like combat at all. They were designing the game as a WoW clone in almost every respect, and people in the alpha complained vigorously until certain changes were made, and now we have this in-between version of WoW and Elder Scrolls that we have at the moment. But if the company, ZeniMax Online Studios, were left to their own devices, they would have just copied World of Warcraft whole cloth, slapped an Elder Scrolls skin on it, and called it a day. It took vigorous complaints in order for it to end up as the middle ground it is now. Either way, as I said, the subscription service for ESO failed utterly. The game was on the verge of death before it went to buy-to-play. So they built ESO up from an unreasonable mess it was on release into a buy-to-play game where you buy it once, and then they support their server upkeep and continued development by selling large-scale DLCs. These were quarterly releases that contained extremely large content. If you are an ESO fan and for some reason you haven't played the Orsinium DLC, get it. I want to say that all 4 of the initial DLCs are kind of worth getting. None of the micro dungeons. That's all garbage. But comparatively speaking, out of the first 4 DLCs, Orsinium tops them all. None of them are worth getting compared to Orsinium, if you can only afford one. Otherwise, the Dark Brotherhood and Thieves Guild and Imperial City, these are all good DLCs. It's just everything they made after that is kind of trash. But hey, you can get your own Clockwork Skeevertron for only $15 in ESO crowns. Get excited, right? They garnered the respect of the player base by putting in those initial 4 really high quality DLCs. And having garnered this larger player base, they've now just abandoned that and gone hard on microtransaction loot boxes, player homes, and other micro dungeon content. Hey, the Clockwork City, that sounds like a name for a good dungeon, right? Turns out they made it a zone. But Falkreath Hold over in Skyrim, that sounds like a good zone, right? Now they made that a dungeon. Anyway, my rants about ESO aside, let's face it, anything that gets in the way of the profit that ESO is bringing in, this recurring income, it needs to be roadblocked. There's no way they'd lend support to a project that could potentially interfere with it. If all they have to do is not give permission, they don't need to provide an excuse. Because while they entertained the idea of allowing an official mod back during the paid mod system, aka Skyrim Script Extender, they stood to profit from it then. Now, a lot of people are going to ask me, well, wouldn't it just be easier for them to send a cease and desist order to the project to get rid of it? You'd think so. But looking at it from Bethesda's perspective, there's a problem with that, and that's the implied license. Something happened to Bethesda during the Daggerfall Morrowind era, and it wasn't just the ZeniMax Media takeover, although that would cost them much of their talent at the time, considering their corporate culture change that went through and alienated a ton of people. One of the quest designers for Morrowind would go on to say that working on Morrowind was one of the worst jobs he ever had. And this is looking back all those years, so that's something. Either way, much of Daggerfall's in-game material and much of Morrowind's concepts were cherry-picked from the community on the old Bethesda forums. Those forums don't exist anymore. Bethesda learned to value the community as a resource early on. That's why all that extra time, practically a year worth of man hours, was put into the creation kit, or the construction set for Morrowind. And the modding community flourished on various websites that no longer exist, including one known as the TES Nexus. By fostering the community, they garnered themselves an extremely loyal player base. That loyalty is eroded with each successive move they make, where a representative has to go on record and say that they won't allow fan complaints to dictate what they do, which is fine. As creators, that would be their prerogative. However, this isn't about artistic vision. This is about what's going to make the most money. But it's still a fairly dangerous game because they're still trying to maintain what community loyalty they have left, because community loyalty, brand loyalty, this translates into word of mouth. It means they have to spend less money on marketing, and they can just know that their brand name is going to sell itself. Something I thought that was going to happen previously. No. They went ahead and they told everyone that starting with Doom and moving into Dishonored 2 and so on and so forth, they would no longer be giving review copies out to actual reviewers. Their reasoning was that they want everyone to experience the game at the same time. While they do this, they gave advance copies to specific YouTubers and influencers. This is within their legal right to do. However, it is completely disregarding the process, and it's very clear that they are just trying to get people to shill and not actually review the games on their own merits. And this came off of Doom having an awful multiplayer, which thank goodness Doom ended up becoming one of my favorite games of that year. But Dishonored 2 suffered from extreme optimization issues on the PC. All of which they thought they could just ignore and have their influencers just talk about how great the game is. And they wouldn't need to send any reviews out. People would just buy it based on the name, right? Well, they've gone back. They backpedaled on that policy now. And it looks like they're backpedaling on that policy, at least appearance sake, because they're eroding away that community trust that they had. The so-called influencers, the people who evangelize for games that haven't even come out yet, after the honeymoon period for those games is over, they see them for what they are. If it's a Bethesda game, chances are it's bugged and glitchy. Unfortunately, this started out as just Bethesda Game Studios, but it's fairly well extended itself over to the Bethesda Softworks publishing brand at this point. We just see fairly inferior quality control standards, at least as far as the PC port goes. But either way, after a couple games, they reneged on that policy where they're no longer giving out advanced copies because they're giving out advanced copies now. So yeah, it turns out people weren't okay being lied to, being told that, oh yeah, you're just wanting everyone to experience it at the same time, but we're going to give these guys it first. That is a lie. That is a bold-faced lie. And so, because of that, people caught on. People called them out on their bullshit. And it became an issue, a talking point. And that talking point got piled on top of the Creation Club and now this Skyrim Together thing. And we've got just a big pile of reasons why it looks like, at least appearance sake, that Bethesda Softworks, by way of ZeniMax Media, their corporate overlords, is becoming a new EA. But much of the loyalty people have for Bethesda comes from that implied license I mentioned earlier. Now, people may be asking, what implied license? If you go on their website and you check out their video policy says that you are free to create fan works, essentially. And they have it listed under their video policy that you can monetize those fan works. I would say that's pretty damn amazing. So yes, you can monetize those fan works, no problem. And that is what helped ramp up the current generation of people willing to evangelize for Bethesda. So why doesn't Bethesda just send DMCAs against pretty much everything, that may interfere with their profit? So why wouldn't they shut down Skyrim Together? It uses their trademark, Skyrim, therefore they should have the opportunity to shut it down if they want to, at least legally speaking. And the answer is, again, it would continue to erode community trust. Now, if people start leaving ESO en masse for this Skyrim multiplayer, which is doubtful, I imagine that fans of ESO are fans of ESO because of the way the game is, not because it is an Elder Scrolls skin close enough to what I want it to be. Like, all the people who thought in their heads this is going to be Skyrim but multiplayer, they were disappointed. They left a long time ago. They have not stuck around. So they may try Skyrim Together, but it's not going to dislodge them from ESO. I think that any impact on ESO will be minimal and that it can be ignored. However, if some kind of mass exodus does happen and people just drop the game like a rock, I think they will shut down Skyrim Together, or at least try to, because their open modding policy is a double-edged sword ultimately. And if they are going to completely abandon artistic vision in favor of the maximum amount of profit, just toss aside their pride as game developers for the sake of making good games, and instead they're going to introduce loot boxes into Elder Scrolls 6. Instead they're going to introduce microtransactions into Fallout 5. Yeah, I could see that. I could then see them starting to take down fan projects left and right. But that's where we're at right now. They do not want to lend any kind of support to old Skyrim. Old Skyrim is in maintenance mode. They're just going to leave it alone and let it do its own thing through Steam. Steam isn't charging them anything to do it. It's just kind of there. But it's something to pay attention to regardless. This Skyrim Together is just the tip of the iceberg. My real fear is that they're going to do another Doom. The announcement for Doom talked about how much they loved their modding community, how much they respected their modding community. Because of that, they're bringing us SnapMap. And when we asked about actual modding tools, they said, no, we only support it through SnapMap. That was id Software / Bethesda Softworks' answer. I'm afraid that when looking at that double-edged sword, the idea that, well, we can't sell this stuff very easily because it turns out there are mods that have made the same thing before, you look at that and the potential for them to remove it is there. I called it back when the E3 Bethesda conference a couple years back was promoting hashtag BE3. Like, at hashtag BE3, we're back at hashtag BE3, hashtag BE3, hashtag BE3. It just reminded me of EA. That was when I was acutely aware the corporate shilling and just descent into bullshit had begun. So, despite all of this, Skyrim Together will endure. They will have to rework massive parts of their systems because they are not allowed to use the Steamworks API, even though, again, Valve lets people use the Steamworks API for Half-Life, Half-Life 2, stuff like that. And that's pretty much all I have to say is I'm not excited about Skyrim Together necessarily because I've seen mods never come out before. When it either comes out or when I'm offered some kind of beta access to it, you betcha I'll publicize it because then I'll have reason to talk about it. But as far as what Bethesda has done, blocking their access to the Steam API, this didn't surprise me at all. And it's especially egregious considering they already did it in the past for SKSE. But remember, this is about profit. Either way, thank you all for watching. Next time, I think we'll get into something a little different, if you know what I mean. Original character, do not steal.